Yeah. All right. So here we go. Welcome today. And we got some announcements. And seems like we're doing okay. All right. It was a big week in Minnesota. Big week in Minnesota. One, it is the as I was talking with Miss Iden in the hall, it's the 5-year anniversary of Prince, passing away of Prince, and so you might hear a lot of Prince songs on the radio if you listen to the radio or streamed in some way. But also with that, yesterday was a big day in Minnesota. All right. And so I don't know if you discussed it at all in your hours 1 or 2, but I just want to see if we can get some highlights here from yesterday. I did on Monday say, this is going to be a big week in Minnesota. And yesterday, the verdict came out. Were you kind of surprised on how quick a verdict was determined? See some heads going this way. I see some going this way. All right. I guess, when I think about it, the amount of days in which testimony was given on both sides, that the verdict could have been longer. I know talking with my daughter and stuff like that, we're expecting maybe today or tomorrow, but yesterday, 11 hours after the trial, closing arguments had been given. 11 hours later, a verdict is rendered. And, well, one could think they started deliberating right away once they were given the charge to come up with the verdict. So on all 3 counts, he's found guilty, which is extraordinary in Minnesota, in which we normally do not convict police officers. And so here he is convicted. And so he could face up to 40 years or more in prison if they give him the max. Yes. The first charge, it brings 40 years. So that'd be the most. So the question that they'll probably is, are they going to serve it concurrently or consecutively? If it's consecutively, then we're looking at, yes, up to 70 some years. Or if they go concurrently and they're all being served at the same time. So that's all out there. All right. But so it's almost 11 months since George Floyd death. And, some in my first hour talked about, why does it take so long? Why does it take so long? And, that's the legal system, the American justice legal system we have. We always think of a right to a fair and speedy trial. But as we can see that this one was not a speedy trial, but both sides compiled their evidence, and at the end result was a conviction. And a USA Today poll came out today, and 71% of Americans do think that this conviction was the correct thing. So that's huge. When you get 71% of the American public to do that. So that's big there in that. So now what is ahead? We got 8 weeks here in between now and the time that he is sentenced. And in that time period, what might happen? Appeals. His defense team most likely will do appeals. And the judge, he's going to review the trial proceedings, making sure everything has followed the rule of law, and there'll be evaluations. But then Derek Chauvin will be sentenced according to the judge in 8 weeks. So that'd be huge. So how do you think people feel in the Twin Cities that this verdict is in? Okay. Anyone else? Why would we feel relieved?
If he was found not guilty, then it just would have been really bad for the city and like Minneapolis and business.
Absolutely. That's why Operation Safety Net was put into place. Things would have exploded. Definitely. Any other feelings, thoughts? Well, if we look at what was being seen on the media, you had the wide range of feelings and thoughts. Some are celebrating, like finally, there is justice being served here. Some were expressed that they hope that it was done quicker. The verdict came in quicker, the process, all that stuff. So a wide range of emotions, not just here, but around the United States. However, what kind of maybe took a little bit away from this verdict? What happened yesterday that could have taken away from the verdict a little bit? There's celebration, but then there's like, oh crap. There was another shooting. All right, a teenage girl, African-American girl, was killed by a police officer in Ohio. So, someone in First Hour says, that this is not going to stop necessarily, but how can we move forward? And that's another part of this process. So we can celebrate, or we can have our sigh of relief that verdict is in, but where do you go from there? That's the next phase. So what do we got to do? How are we going to move? How are we going to move forward? What has to be done? And if we can fall on our civil rights study here, what has to be done? I know we probably have some thoughts. We just may not want to share those thoughts. Well, what do we have to do? Because almost right away, again, people are saying, let's celebrate, but there's a lot of energy that can be used here.
They can put some laws into place.
Okay, could possibly put some laws into place here. Now really, the burden here is on civic leaders and lawmakers. What can you do here? If we are truly thinking about change, what can you do? Now, that same poll that was asked, and now that the internet they messed up my iPad and all that stuff, was, okay, you approved the verdict, what are you going to do? Now that number drops down to about 60%, 61% said, I'll accept the verdict, but not get involved. What does that mean to get involved? Could be just like, what we're studying. It could mean getting some of that grassroots efforts. Do some marching, do some protesting, put some pressure on people. But so it looks like Americans were ready to accept, but maybe not check in. So to go back here again here, it could spark some change here, maybe some laws, but also about policing practices as well. If anything we learned from perhaps the riots and perhaps some of these larger civil rights moments, it does grab a hold of the attention. It does create some change, but sometimes it may not be far-reaching. Meaning in 67, 68, we had some citizen boards being created after these race riots, and they only lasted for a few years, and then they went away. So do we have enough here to keep that change going? All right. Anyone have some thoughts? Any thoughts? And it can also be the people at home too. You can always put into the chat. Okay. Well, one person brought up in my first hour a really good point, that perhaps a big issue out there is racial indifference. The idea of racial indifference. And if true change happens, we have to address racial indifference. I thought that was a good point by one of the students. Okay. So keep that cognizant in mind. Even if you didn't want to share your thoughts or ideas, hopefully you're reflecting and seeing what you can do, your role, if you want to really create change. You really want to create some good change. All right. Remember, I was born in the 60s, so maybe a little bit of that idea of change and that we can change our society is ingrained in my thinking. All right. So with that, we'll switch gears, and can always, if you want, we can always talk one-on-one about this. We'll switch subjects. We'll go back to the civil rights movement here, and we're looking at ultimately creating some change. And grassroots is a key point here, a key element of creating the change of the civil rights movement in the 50s and the 60s. And we cannot just think that just because we have some pretty big laws passed and Supreme Court decisions in the 60s that civil rights is done. It's an ongoing thing. Civil rights is an ongoing transformational process. But grassroots then and now is very, very important. And so much of the civil rights movement that we could see that a good number of the people who are fighting for the cause are young people. But they're not always young. All right, so I'm going to spotlight Ella Baker. All right, and Ella Baker, she is associated with SNCC. All right, and again, what does SNCC stand for? Let's talk about that. What's it stand for? Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. That's a huge one. That's huge. All right. So she's one of the founding members of SNCC. We think of some of these icons of the civil rights movement like John Lewis, even Diane Nash, Martin Luther King Jr., Stokely Carmichael, James Farmer. We can put Malcolm X in there as well, but Ella Baker is an important one here. Right? Almost as important as Rosa Parks. She's considered kind of like the mother of the civil rights movement. All right? So here, I've got a little video clip here about Ella Baker. I don't think I showed it in class.
Young people come first.
By the end of April in 1960, over 50,000 students had staged sit-ins throughout the South. They were becoming the vanguard of the civil rights struggle. But they had little support or encouragement from the movement's leadership, accustomed to employing less aggressive tactics.
Activism was not the style of the civil rights movement. Some of our elders thought it was a bit much to be putting yourself up for jail and violence. They certainly refused to see young people as a part of their struggle.
A little-known 56-year-old civil rights veteran named Ella Baker would change that. Ella Baker, granddaughter of slaves, had been a grassroots organizer all over the South for 2 decades, a quiet but radical force.
She would say, like the turtle, you have to put your tail on the line. And students could understand that. And we did put our tails on the line.
Now, together with students less than half her age, Baker helped found a new organization, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC.
The level at which SNCC operated was the most dangerous level. It was the shock troop level. They went into the towns and the places where segregation ran amok. They were in parts of the South that can only be called terrorist.
Historically, civil rights and many other movements are top down. Mrs. Baker believed that the ultimate source of power is at the level where the people are. Up here does not direct down here. Down here directs up there.
The day has come when racism must be banished.
So many people of your generation, you two, describe her as this visionary force. Why isn't she a household word of the civil rights movement?
Because the movement was, I hate to say this, it was dominated by ministers and religious leaders, and they didn't see a role for women in leadership positions.
Until the killing of black men, black mothers' sons, becomes as important to the rest of the country as the killing of a white mother's son.
That was Ella Baker.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest until this happens.
She took the long sweep of her life and her experiences and poured it into young folks.
Ella Baker and SNCC helped the civil rights movement broaden and gain momentum.
All right, so I think just in that little snippet that there is some nuggets that could still be very applicable today. Definitely could. But one thing that perhaps with SNCC and with Ella Baker becomes very maybe effective is this idea of grassroots. You know, when we talk about grassroots, you're right there. You're right there. You know, and the gentleman in there described it quite well, that you cannot lead from the top and tell the people down below. You have to be right there. And that was the power of this grassroots organization, SNCC. That's why in some ways they might be more effective than the NAACP in trying to organize groups to do things. Right? NAACP is very effective in litigation. But where they struggle is where SNCC and perhaps CORE can go and can do. And that is at the roots. So huge. And Ella Baker is there. Maybe they followed Ella Baker a little bit more because she's kind of like a mother figure or a grandmother to them. That's huge. All right. Okay. Tough day here. It's a tough day. Any thoughts about this clip or? All right. You have a task at hand, don't you? What's our task at hand? As soon as we can tell you what our task at hand is, I can get off your back. What is it, Annie? You gotta speak loud, say it like you're proud. All right. Do you have some questions you gotta answer? All right. And we're looking at a minimum. How many posts per question?
2 posts per question.
You got it. You got it. Can you work with Historical Buddy?
Yes.
Absolutely, you can. Or you can go solo. That's fine. That's fine as well. You can. That's how you roll. That's how you roll. All right. And it is due tomorrow.